Well, it's beginning to look a lot like Russia, and that's something I never thought I would be saying in my lifetime. I was a kid back in the 1980s, and one of my earliest memories is a Republican president saying, "Mr. President, tear down that wall." I also remember a time when the wrestling villains were played or were portrayed as Russians. And these days, if Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff or Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik were to come along today, well, they would be heroes. They would be the babyface and the good guy standing up for what's right and standing up for freedom and waving the American flag would have been the bad guy and the villain and booed out of the room. That's how screwed up this country truly has become. And when I read stories like the one I'm going to be reading to you now, I say to myself, how did we start looking so much like the Kremlin when this is the United States of America and we're supposed to have a free press? Pete Hegseth didn't get that memo. Pete Hegseth is changing the rules at the Pentagon, and that's what we're going to be covering in this segment. So I appreciate y'all so much for sticking with me here on the channel while we still have a democracy at the moment. Truly, folks, it doesn't feel like we have much of one. And I have a lot of people say, Brando, how are you feeling about the midterms? I really do believe that in a free and fair election, Democrats could win in a landslide. But with these people in charge pulling stunts like this, I think we're going to be in for the long haul, and it's going to be a long, hard road out of hell. And I really hate to say that. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or bring down the temperature in the room. I just believe in being honest with my audience. Stories like this concern me, and they should concern anyone, regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. So before I read it, I just want to thank everyone for subscribing to the channel, and if you haven't already, be sure and hit that subscribe button and help us get to 1 million subscribers. I truly do appreciate all of you. But check out this article right here from The Hill, and forget about whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or where you fall on the political spectrum, and ask yourself if you want to live in a country where the press has these kind of rules put on them. So Hegseth changes the Pentagon press policy, and here are the 5 takeaways. Starting on Wednesday, all but one media outlet that regularly covers the Department of Defense is set to lose access to the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth demanded that the reporters agree by 5 p.m. Tuesday to a new policy under which they would need to pledge to not obtain or use any unauthorized material, even if the information is unclassified, or hand over their press badges in the next 24 hours. Media outlets say this is a violation of their First Amendment rights, and nearly every news outlet has refused to sign. The rejections mean that for the first time since the Eisenhower administration, no major U.S. television network or publication will have permanent presence in the Pentagon. Reporters and editors who have urged defense officials to reconsider the policy say they will continue to cover the U.S. military with or without access to the building. But the rules mark a new chapter in how journalists will cover the armed forces, and here are the key takeaways. All but one outlet is refusing to sign. Every major television network, wire, publication, and radio outlet has gone on record in saying that their reporters have refused to sign the policy, including ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, the Associated Press, Bloomberg News, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, The Atlantic, Financial Times, Politico, and NPR, among others. The Hill and its sister network News Nation have also declined to sign. In a joint statement issued on Tuesday afternoon, each of the major broadcast networks said it would not sign the policy. Today, we join every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' ability to keep the nation and world informed of important national security issues, the statement read. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. Several right-leaning news organizations have balked at the policy, including Fox News, The Washington Times, and Newsmax, the latter of which has said it believes the requirements are unnecessary and onerous. The lone outlet that has agreed to the rule as of Tuesday evening is One America's News Network, a far-right news and political commentary television channel, and the website that has frequently given favorable coverage to the administration. Under the new rules, journalists are technically not barred from investigating, reporting, or publishing stories on the U.S. military using information deemed sensitive or unclassified, but they could be deemed a vague security or safety risk should they even ask the Defense Department personnel for such information according to the rules. The policy stipulates that when journalists receive and publish unsolicited, classified, or sensitive information from the government sources, they are generally protected in doing so by the First Amendment. But if you solicit the disclosure of such information or otherwise encourage Defense Department personnel to violate laws and policies concerning the disclosure of such information, such conduct may weigh in consideration of whether you pose a security or a safety risk. The Pentagon describes solicitation as including calls for tips, encouraging military personnel to share non-public information, as many reporters do via their publications or personal social media platforms. That was the main sticking point for reporters, the Press-Pentagon Association said in a forceful statement last week. Hegseth and his department are trying to stifle a free press with a new policy, which it conveys as unprecedented message of intimidation to anyone within the DoD, warning against unapproved interactions with the press and even suggesting it's criminal to speak without express permission, which it plainly is not. In an op-ed published Tuesday, NPR's Pentagon reporter Tom Bowman said, signing the document would make us stenographers parroting press releases, not watchdogs holding government officials accountable. The new rules follow a steady stream of directives of Hegseth's office, which have sought to severely curtail press access and accommodations in the Pentagon since the start of the year. So, in late January, his office has removed 4 outlets from the Defense Department workspaces under a so-called rotation program, replacing them with media outlets including One America News and Breitbart News, whose journalists have been favorable to the Trump administration. So you can see where this is going. It's anyone who has been favorable to them and will agree to whatever they say, that's who's going to get the pass, and anyone who questions or rocks the boat is going to be put out if they don't sign this, and I don't know how else you can slice it other than this is straight up right out of the Kremlin's playbook. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we were taught in school. I mean, at least my generation was, that this wasn't a very American thing. But the journalists removed from the desk were still allowed to work in the building, though Hegseth's office made it difficult by restricting reporters from accessing the Pentagon's briefing room, one of the few places in the building where wireless internet to use for filing stories. Then in May, Hegseth restricted journalists from most hallways of the Pentagon without an official escort, an extreme decision as reporters had enjoyed access throughout much of the building for decades without being monitored. Secure or restricted spaces have always been off limits to the press without official permission. Under the new rules, the Pentagon also plans to move all news organizations from their dedicated workspaces, moving the press corps to a still unknown location in the building, likely making it harder for reporters to have access to military personnel. Hegseth also has not briefed Pentagon reporters in nearly 4 months, and Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson has not conducted a briefing in 2 months, all while the U.S. military has conducted legally questionable military strikes in the Caribbean Sea, deployed troops to American cities, and continues to operate across the globe. You know, it really doesn't come as a shock to me that they're going to try to dial this back and not allow the press to ask questions, because there's a whole lot of questions to be asked right now on the way that our military is being used, especially against American citizens, and especially the fact that we've seen Americans arrested without due process. This is all playing out exactly like we all thought it would. And again, this is not a moment that we gloat in saying we told you so, but we knew the seriousness of this. We knew what Donald Trump was all about because we listened to him. And I do believe we listened way more than his followers ever did, or especially the casual voter that just, randomly shows up and votes every 4 years and they vote Republican as Papa did. I really think those people have been tuned out and not paying attention. And they probably wouldn't have took us seriously anyway because they would have thought we were being hyperbolic, but yet here we are. So Hegseth, who has frequently displayed animosity toward the press, on Monday mocked media outlets that said they would not sign his policy, posting emojis waving goodbye on social media in response to posts from the New York Times and the Atlantic, who both issued statements blasting the move. He responded in the same manner to a statement from the Washington Post, which said the policy undercuts the First Amendment protections by placing unnecessary constraints on gathering and publishing information. The Pentagon chief on Tuesday insisted the press restrictions were common sense stuff designed to protect classified information and prevent reporters from accessing certain areas of the Pentagon, despite rules that already limit access to unclassified areas and materials. So, of course, Trump defends the policy, making it unlikely to change. Donald Trump said on Tuesday he threw his support behind the Pentagon's policy, calling the press very dishonest and insisting that the rules were necessary as Hegseth finds the press to be very disruptive in terms of world peace and maybe security of our nation. Trump backed Hegseth, who was seated alongside him during a meeting with the president of Argentina at the White House, suggesting that he could also move the White House press corps out of the building should he choose. "You're lucky I'm president because we could move them very easily across the street," he said. "I find that when it comes to war, it bothers me to have soldiers and even high-ranking generals walking around with you guys on their sleeve." So, yeah, I know when I started off this video and I said it's beginning to look a lot like Russia, a lot of you may have rolled your eyes and said, "Brando, really, are you going to go there?" Yes, I'm going to go there because it's very clear what they're doing. They're using our military in ways we've never seen used before. They're bypassing Congress completely, by the way. None of this stuff is going through Congress. I mean, I remember a time when we had fierce debates about going to Iraq or not. I remember a time when presidents had to clear things like this with Congress. Donald Trump's doing none of that. So I just want to point that out. These things aren't coming to a vote. It's just Donald Trump acting and hitting boats in the Caribbean and putting troops on our streets with the governor saying, "Hey, we don't need you here. There's no need for you to be here." And you have statistics saying that the crime is coming down, and then you have the DOJ removing those studies. It's clear to me that they don't want to face the music. It's clear to me that they do not want to face the noise of what's going on in this world, and they don't want to take the tough questions. And it all goes back to Donald Trump saying that he calls it fake news if it speaks ill toward him. If it speaks bad toward him, then he calls it fake news. And if it says good stuff about him, then he says it's the best of news. And look, I mean, right-leaning organizations, they get a pass, and they will say whatever he wants. So you're going to be living in a world where, I mean, that's a dictator, folks. There's no other way for me to slice it. There's no other way that I can put it to you, because how are we ever going to hear the truth when these people can't face the music? And I truly believe that at the end of the day, that's what this truly is. I just believe they're incapable of facing the music. They're incapable of facing the hard questions because of the way that they're using our military. It truly is disgusting, and it truly is an attack on our First Amendment, and more people should be talking about this. And this should not be a matter of Republican versus Democrat. It shouldn't be a political issue. This should be an American issue. I look at it that, you know what? We all come to the table with our ideas. We present them in the best way that we can, and the people decides what's best. And we have a free press who is allowed to question our leaders. And I hate to do the whataboutisms, but everything they ever said Obama was going to do, all the things they said, now Obama will send the troops to the states. He'll send them right. He'll put troops on the ground. He'll declare martial law. He'll ban the press. Everything that they have said Obama would do, they're sitting back and letting Trump do, and they're applauding it. And there's people out there who have came into the political argument that all they're here for is to own the libs, so they don't care. And they don't realize how this is going to come back and bite them right square in the ass. But Donald Trump lives in a world where anything that disagrees with him is fake news, and he's trying to eliminate it altogether, so the only news you hear is what he wants you to hear. That is straight up authoritarian. And before I go, I will remind you of the definition. That is favoring strict obedience to authority, especially at the expense of personal freedom. And we are seeing the First Amendment under assault like never before, and we have to put our political differences aside and stand together on the right side of history, or we're going to lose our rights altogether. And that's not me trying to create hysteria. It's not a video I enjoy making. It's not a point that I enjoy bringing to you. I mean, I really don't. I don't get no joy in saying this, but we are clearly living under a dictatorship at the moment, and we have all got to come together and work to change it, because we cannot allow our First Amendment right to slip away. Once it's gone, folks, we're never going to have it back.